So, welcome to Talk Like a Man, Afrofuturist Science Fiction and Fantasy with Nisi Shawl at the Edinburgh Anarchist Feminist Book Fair 2021. If you're joining us for the first time, please take a moment to look over our Safer Spaces agreement, which is available to read on our website, and I'll also post the link in the chat. On the website, you can also check out the book fair stalls and the full program for the weekend. As ever, the book fair is made possible by people giving their time and labor. All donations we take go directly to the speakers and organizations taking part. So if you can, please consider donating to our PayPal, which I'll also drop a link to. And we're always keen to hear feedback about how we can improve the book fair next year and make our programming and our spaces more accessible. So if you have thoughts you'd like to share after the event, drop us a line on the feedback page on our website. So about this event, Nisi Shawl will read an extract from their new collection of previously uncollected stories, Talk Like a Man, which is available from PM Press. So I'll also drop a link to the book. And this will be followed by a Q&A with Robert Kiley. Nisi Shawl is a cutting-edge Afrofuturist icon whose politically charged fiction is in the grand feminist tradition of Ursula K. Guin, Octavia Butler, and Suzie Charnas. They also wrote the 2016 Nebula Award finalist Everfair, an alternate history of a fictional utopia in the Belgian Congo. Shawl edited the anthology New Sons, Speculative Fiction by People of Color, winner of multiple awards, including the Locus, World Fantasy, Ignyte, and Brave New Words awards. In 1999, they co-founded the representation and speculative fiction-focused nonprofit Carl Brandon Society, and in 2005, they co-wrote Writing the Other, A Practical Approach, now a standard text on inclusivity. For over 20 years, they've served on the board of the Clarion West Writers Workshop, and they live in Seattle and take frequent walks with their cat. And the Q&A will then be with Robert Kiley, who is the author of Simmering of a Declarative Void and Incomparable Poetry, an essay on the financial crisis of 2007 and 8, and Irish literature. He was poet in residence at the University of Surrey from 2019 to 2021. So thank you both for taking the time to be here, and I will now pass over to Nisi Shawl.
Thank you. Robert, were you going to add anything?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I feel so lucky to have you with us, Nisi. Thank you for doing this, and that we're going to hear from a short story from this book, which is completely amazing and everybody should get from the book stall at the book fair website. And I just wanted to add one other small note that before introducing Nisi, I was kind of looking at the bibliography of Nisi's work at the back of this. And it kind of made me think about Nisi's work, their life's work, as a kind of plant, like with an immense bloom of Everfair, the novel, a kind of spray of short stories, Filter House and other short stories, and below the ground, like an intricate system of roots that selflessly kind of nourishes neighboring plants. And this is included in kind of all the editorial work they've done that you heard from our introducer. And also when thinking about the bibliography, I thought of the importance of science fiction conventions in this root network, Nisi's part in the Carl Brandon Society, which was mentioned. And I'd like to give this quote from the Acknowledgements of Everfair, which is, "Writing is a solitary act that expresses the genius of a community." I think Nisi's body of work is completely entangled with other people, and not just in its output, but it seems to me in its practice and in how it gets made. It is convivial, rooted in community building, just as it is frequently about community building, utilizing a wide variety of social technologies in its attempt to envision and put into practice a more just world, a slow, patient attempt to unweave the legacies of heteronormativity and colonialism. So over to Nisi.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. I am deep into now writing a sequel to Everfair, which is it's all about those roots, those webs between the different trees and plants. So, but we'll focus now on what's available to people. And I will read from something more which was inspired in part by a singer called, oh gosh, now I've completely lost her name. From Fairport Convention, Sandy Denny. And so to start, I'm going to sing a song that she sang, just a verse of it, and then I'll read an excerpt from the story. As gentle tides go rolling by along the salt sea strand, the colors blend and flow as one, together on the sand. And often do the winds entwine, do send their distant call, the quiet joys of brotherhood, and love is Lord of all. She went down the stairs. She wasn't going to fall like Mum had that time. The stairs were safe, broad and tidily carpeted with a beige runner that hid the dirt. They were dull and familiar as the rest of the house where Allie had lived since she was a baby. The stairs were safe, and it was Mum's fault. She'd come home from grammar school 10 years ago to find her heaped on the landing. The stairs turned a corner there. She stopped. No mirror had ever hung on this wall, yet in the dusk, she saw her reflection. Allie came closer. The reflection stood still. No, it wasn't her. And anyway, there was no frame around the figure standing so quietly. No mirror frame or doorway, only the shadows of the corners melting away into a soft glow like candles backlighting the woman who was not Allie. Short and plump, yes, but her skin was darker, even given the dimness surrounding them both, and her hair much crinklier, like a Negro's. She wore different clothes too, a long dress, a flower print that looked flannelish, smocked from the shoulders to below her breasts. Her dark eyes widened as Allie approached. She opened her mouth and disappeared. Allie's hand brushed the wall's olive paint with a dry sound like a whisper. Hadn't she seen the woman before? A dream, surely, or another hallucination, what everyone else took drugs to get. She decided to draw her, but say nothing about this latest episode to Mum. She continued down. Her sketch pad was on the table in the entry hall with her nursing texts and Mike's letters from Australia. 3 steps from the bottom, she caught at the baluster to save herself. Only a second, and things settled back down. She needed a drink. It never made anything worse. Times she remembered, they seemed to have made them better. In the sitting room, the mantel clock's round face read 6:30. Early yet. Lower and to the left, Mum's face looked up from her magazine with about as much expression as the clock. Allie wasn't like her, never would be. Got a class? If Allie lied, Mum would find out. No, I'm going to study what mattered, the music. Take a wrap. It's not spring yet. The door cut off Mum's weather forecast. On the pavement, Allie struggled into the woolly cardigan she'd snatched from the hat stand, shifting her textbooks from arm to arm. April in Wimbledon meant sharp winds, low skies, and puddles to step around as she made her way to the bus stop. During the long ride, she roughed out the lady from the landing in pencil, then did her again in pen, thinner. As she worked, Allie understood why she had thought her a mirror image, then believed she'd seen her somewhere before. The face was remarkably like Allie's own, a little off from what she saw over the washstand each morning, but close enough. That must be it, she thought, and shut the book. At the restaurant above Cousins, she lucked out. Bert and Justin were there eating supper. They chipped together and bought her a plate of goulash, pouring her drinks from their bottle of red wine. Justin winked at her and she only stared back. What a dish. Too bad he knew it. But Bert was all right. He agreed to call her up for a couple of numbers so she could get into the club free. Cousins opened and they descended. Ginny arrived along with some girls from art school and ordered lagers all around. One of Ginny's friends looked a little underage in her silver shift. Some of the others stunk of weed despite an overlayer of patchouli. Ginny stunk too. That was why they weren't such close pals as they used to be. Was Ginny wanting to find again that way what Allie had never totally gotten rid of? Allie sang well. That good feeling came up within her, came over her and all around her and wrapped her inside itself. Music was something Mum never had. Allie did Polly Vaughan for the traddy crowd and It Ain't Me, Babe, the only Dylan Bert ever covered. Carried along by the melodies, she didn't have to worry what was up or down or left or right. Then she was let loose again. Her bit was over. Bert got on with his solo act while Justin obliged with a few gin and tonics. She wound up going home to his flat with him, though there were plenty better looking birds than Allie within spitting distance. Life was a jumble of disjointed scenes by then, the cig they shared in the taxi and its driver cursing them as they dropped it, and the smell of the plastic seat cushion burning, the wet glint of the area steps down to Justin's door, which was how she realized it had started raining again. The red velvet of his Chesterfield soft under her cheek and his chest scratching her back as if it were covered in horsehair, his drunken wonder that he'd finally gotten her to fuck him. Too tall for you. That's what I thought you thought, Allie. That you wouldn't never go with no bloke near twice your height. And she laughed and fell in love and then asleep. In Allie's dream, the lady spoke. Her voice was sad, her words warnings and pleas for help. Allie needed to watch out for the wizard, keep him at arm's length and keep track of him. He'll switch himself into a body in your time. We can do that trick, some of us. I could, the lady said. Allie knew her name, but not how to say it. I could be in your place if I wanted. They stood on a beach. Cows nosed through the washed up kelp. Wet sand threw back a wavering picture of their skinny brown legs and bulky bodies and the pewter sky above. Allie tried to suss out what a wizard from the past would want with her, a nursing student, a singer. The lady seemed to hear her thoughts. It's me, she said. He wants me. He can hurt me through you. If only Allie knew what he looked like, she'd have an easier time spotting him. He'll probably have a beard and a mustache. He'll be powerful, even in your time. Special, a magician or something like that. He'll have lots of women. She began to run both hands over her face as if wiping away weariness. He looks like this, she said, and Allie woke in Justin's arms. Justin had a mustache and a beard, and as many women as he ever wanted. A moment more, Allie let her eyes linger on the tumbling of his red-brown hair, on his noble jaw, even longer now, relaxed in sleep. But what did he see in her? Likeness to the lady? Slipping from his side and picking her way across the flat's cluttered floor, she dressed at hazard and escaped. Outside, it was barely morning, clouds like wadded chips papers scudding low. Kicking wet rubbish from her path, she slouched off to Cambridge Circus to find a cab home, already regretting her decision to ditch him. Her dreams and hallucinations had slowed down by secondary school, then picked up again when she started her internship at Brompton Hospital. It maybe had something to do with being near so many people about to die. Possibly she shouldn't pay any attention to her hallucinations. She was nothing like Mum. Allie ran into Justin again a week later. He seemed a bit puzzled, but friendly enough. No indication he wanted to pick up where they'd left off, and she convinced herself he simply didn't remember, which hurt, of course, but also made her feel less a fool. She locked love away with her other secrets. "Are you happy now?" she wanted to ask the lady, but the lady was absent from Allie's apparitions for a while, months and months, over a year, until the audition. Allie had been singing all along, alone and with a skiffleish band, getting better and better. Last quarter, she'd quit school for it, going for her dream now, not Mum's safe bet. Off with the white Oxfords and on soon enough with paisley shawls from Carnaby Street boutiques. Allie was on her way to the top of the pops. None of these men had ever heard of her, though. What a motley lot, she thought, watching them warm up in the pub they'd commandeered for the afternoon. Long hairs and denim and jerseys, not a wizard among them. They could play, particularly the lead guitarist, a gawky camel-faced lad called Henry. She gave them The Shooting of His Deer, her strongest folk number, then followed that with her own Just Before the Dawn. Let her voice carry her beyond the four walls on its broad currents, brushing up ripples of sound with the turn of her tongue, only ruffling the surface so they could feel how deep it went, sweeping quietly along till the climax and crashing down in great waves over the stones of the last words to swirl in the still pool of the end. The bassist looked at the drummer. Quite. They all grinned. Not that night, but the next, the lady reappeared. In the intervening year, she had grown no older. She wore the same dress. The sea shone in the distance like mercury. They met on the balcony of a white marble building, a temple of some sort, Allie thought. The lady's pleas were more urgent than ever, but impossible to get the sense of. Finally, she summoned another person, a brown-skinned man who left and quickly returned with a pad and a crayon set. "Have you found him yet?" wrote the lady. She sat on a bench and patted a place for Allie beside her. "I think so," Allie wrote. "Has he tried to kill you?" Frightened, Allie shook her head. That was why she was supposed to be on guard? She wished the lady had explained better. "Didn't you say he was after you, not me?" she scrawled. She looked around. Against white clouds, blue birds with wingspans like a gull's soared. This was a dream, right? She could wake up like last time. "Danger," the lady wrote hastily. "Don't go yet. He can hurt me through you. Are you sure you know who it is? You're getting closer to the lady balled her fists and made a frustrated face. "To the thing that might happen." Justin? Or another bearded man with heaps of lovers? "Can you draw him?" Allie asked, and the lady sketched out a colored man, shoulders up, a hair a tangle of leafless twigs, eyes squinting with laughing malevolence, an expression she'd never seen on easygoing Justin. Her love. "No, that's not him," she managed to write, blinking, which only made the tears spill out onto her cheeks. The lady grabbed the pad back and wrote furiously, her crayon strokes wide with pressure. "Find him first, before he finds you. Otherwise, it is all over." What was over? Why? "He wants to come back there, escape, and fight me through how he messes up the lines you make. It will be easy unless I can use your..." The lady drew an upside-down triangle with a vertical line running from apex to base, only to scribble it out and continue writing. "Your body." Use her body. What was the difference between that and death? Allie regarded the lady skeptically. She was a Negro, no matter how similar some of their features. What reason did Allie have to help her, to believe her? If not for the lady's warning, Allie and Justin would be together. Without much effort, a kind of a half twist of her head, she left. Waking slowly, face still wet with tears, Allie couldn't stomach how naive she had once been. Only 18 and such a child. Why had she ever even trusted the lady? She looked a lot like Allie. That meant nothing. Coincidence, nothing more. Now Allie was 19, almost 20. A shot or two at bedtime chased the visions away. Allie focused on her career. Rehearsal ate up big blocks of time. The recording sessions. Then gigs in cellars around town, new night spots to support the album. Afterwards, she'd go out drinking with the band and Justin would show up, often with his new wife. They bought a van and hit the road. Clubs were starting up outside London too. They drove back home when they were done most of the time. Ginny tagged along. There was plenty of room, even with their equipment, and she brought the smoke. Allie kept the windows cranked down as much as possible. Owners gave them knowing looks anyway as they piled out, reeking and snickering. Not that plenty of the owners didn't take their fair share of drugs themselves. Allie dug her knuckles in her back and arched. Cool shadows covered the dark brick walls on either side of the alley. This place had its own sound system, but they'd still have to haul their instruments up. For once they were playing above ground, easier to load downhill at the end of the night. Jordy and Nick emerged from the covered stairway laughing at some joke she hadn't heard. Allie acted like she was about to pick up Henry's guitar case. Here, Nick handed her a snare. He'll want his girl to take that up if he don't. His girl? Allie would have expected Ginny to go after somebody better looking. But when they passed each other in the club's doorway, Ginny had Henry by the hand, and she was wearing that look, sleek and alert, eyes blazing, cheeks full of blood, scent high and warm. More power to her. Allie made another 3 trips for a crash cymbal, her purse, and her own guitar. Not that she used it on stage anymore. But she wasn't going to leave it lying about in the open after making Mum buy it with the money meant for Mike. The floor creaked. Lacquer smell crept up from the furniture shop below. No dressing room to speak of. An hour before the show, they crowded into the office of the owner, a nervous chap in a pearl-snapped shirt who refused to sit in his own chair. Jordy and Ian did a good job soothing him. Nick made sticks of his fingers and worked over the waste can and the sides of the desk, its drawers and handles. He hated waiting as much as she did. At last, there were enough tables full when the owner peeked around the edge of his office door. Time to take the stage. Allie stoppered up the Drambuie bottle. Outside the spotlight, no one besides the band. Inside it, her and her voice. She rocked and cradled the sound as it came out, whispered feather breaths, cried notes hard as church stones. Then it was over again. She and Ian helped Nick pack his gear while Jordy settled up. Henry and Ginny disappeared, naturally, supposedly off to fetch curries for the lot of them. Allie wasn't hungry, a good thing considering the weight she'd put on lately. She gave Nick the eye, something special about him, the time he kept, the beat he found, his wild hair and hollow-faced intensity. Nothing meant for her there, though. He was looking straight at her, but he didn't seem to notice what he saw. Ian? He smiled back at her as she tied down the top of the big bass case. She headed casually over to the table where he was stashing tools in a kit. Stood there in stupid silence till he shut the toolkit and picked it up and walked away. So she was fat, so what? She was getting more and more famous. The band stayed on the circuit and she met other musicians, also famous, from around the world. Allie slept with some, fucked a few more. One threw a scare into her despite her hard-won cynicism, his hair and skin so similar to the lady's portrait, and the Fu Manchu mustache and goatee, and the hordes of groupies eager to make it with a black, and the way his first album almost edged out the Beatles out of the top spot. It took a full tumbler of gin before she gathered the courage to show up at his hotel. A waste. In the morning, she recalled nothing except the lady shaking her disembodied head in a darkened window on the 14th floor, a reflection of someone not there, never there. It was Bert who informed her of Justin and Connie's separation. They were all three at the same table in a nameless pub. Allie had no idea how she'd gotten there, but she knew how she left. She put her hand over Justin's as it lay on the greasy tabletop, and he let it rest there a moment, then turned his palm up to mesh his fingers with hers and lifted it, and she floated off in his tow, following him out the door under the sparkling stars, and gently drifted to the ground on the pavement in front of his latest digs. He gave her a hand a squeeze and dropped it. Charmingly awkward, as he fished out his keys and smiled and asked, "Will you stay a while longer this time?" She knew she was happy. He was too, but she was the one who knew. And you couldn't call it cheating what he did when they made up the rules as they went. The lady kept trying to intrude. Her face appeared in bottle sides on bath water, spreading out ringwise from the spigot, or materializing from mounds of suds like cloud pictures when Ali switched to foaming crystals. Her voice echoed in the background of demo tapes. "Listen, listen," she sang, for nobody but Ali to hear. Then the ill-fated day, Ali woke up crying and couldn't tell anyone why. She didn't know. Her happiness had suddenly vanished like the glitter on a wave cap when the sun goes. The band were on tour, but when it came time to climb in the van, she couldn't do it. She called Justin and he agreed to meet her at the hotel and bring her on to the next stop separately. They waited at the service entrance to the pub where the band had been booked for that night. No sign of the others, and no equipment or instrument cases to indicate they'd already been and gone looking for cheaper alcohol. At last, the manager came toward them, swaggering and stooping at the same time, studying the boards under his pointy-toed boots. He'd been too busy for questions when they came in, but now he stood silent a moment before speaking. "Bit of an accident," he said. "Of course, I know it ain't in the contract, but if you could help us out solo, maybe your young man here might accompany you." "Accident? What sort of accident would you be talking about?" Justin asked. His long left arm went around Allie's shoulder. She sank against his side, shivering in the March sun. The van had overturned. The drummer, the manager said, Nick, and Ginny, both dead. Justin drove her to see the survivors, Ian with both legs broken, the others pretty cut up, but basically all right physically. Henry had fallen asleep at the wheel. Henry had caused the wreck. Ginny had become his bird, barely a scratch on him. He lay in a hospital bed, stoned on prescription drugs, heavy sedation to keep the hysterics at bay. Allie read the doses on his chart. It would be a long while till he came to. She sat by him and held his spider-fingered hand anyway. Perhaps he'd be able to feel it in his unconscious state. Tears slid down her cheeks continually, but that wasn't a problem, really. Plenty of tissue boxes in a hospital. She sent Justin for carryout. Not terribly surprised when he stayed away past closing. Ginny had been one of his, too. Allie made shameless use of her old Brompton credentials, and the night nurse overlooked her presence after visiting hours. Later, Allie snapped awake in the chair to find Henry staring at her, or staring at someone. Henry's face above Henry's body, and his arm still attached to the hand that she still held. But in the eyes, another. A dream, she thought, and then Henry's mouth opened and that other spoke, a foreign tongue. Pardon? She wanted to look away, didn't manage to. Huh, said the voice in Henry's mouth. Gotta power uppin'. English now, sort of. Drool spun a silver thread down his chin. Ali thrust his hand back on the bed and let go, or tried to let go. Their palms clung together like doomed lovers. Yes, see? Ali did see. Henry's eyes, whatever looked through them, the exact same expression as the lady's drawing. She strained to turn her head, to snatch back her hand. The wizard snickered. What's wrong? He sounded no more than slightly buzzed now. The grip on her hand tightened. His other arm swung up stiffly and hovered above the tray next to the bed, knocking over a water glass to shatter on the lino. Thin, strong figures wadded the fabric of her bodice into a knot and pulled her closer, closer into his embrace. Unavoidable, his chapped lips, hollow laughter, writhing tongue, something white on it, pushing pills bitter between her teeth, salt with his blood, her own blood. Hear you! None of that! The night nurse, pulling her free, slammed Ali back in her seat. Ali coughed and retched, and the pills came up. She caught them in her fists, slimy with spit. The nurse never noticed, fussing over Henry, summoning help. His eyes were shut. Was he shamming it? Best you leave, miss, the night nurse said over her shoulder as more staff came in, her tone stern and fearful at the same time. Well, it was her watch. And if it came out that she'd let Ali stay... Picking up her purse, Ali stumbled out of the room, down the hall to the elevator. On the street, unfriendly lamps lit intersections glistening with wet. She had no idea which way their hotel was, where Justin had got to. Right before the road curved, a golden light spilled from an open door, which quickly shut to extinguish it. When she got there, it was what she'd pictured. A pub. Not the one where they had been going to play, but another pub, older, better, full of strangers. After a couple of good drinks, she felt more like herself. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Nisi. Thank you. Yeah, just before we start the Q&A as well, at the very beginning, I also wanted to just thank everybody at the Edinburgh Anarchist Feminist Book Fair for organizing this, and yeah, the tech support here today, and thank you for that. I'll start us off with a question. Nisi, I was thinking about, while reading this story and hearing it there, the back of Filter House, the short story collection, which talks about the stories moving or leaping backwards and forwards in time. And in the story you just shared, at one moment, there's a main character who mistakes the future for the past. So it seems to me that one of the things that is unwoven by your fictions is the idea of a cumulative progressive chronology or history. Could you say more about this and your description of Everfair, the novel, as Afro-retrofuturism? And I ask all this because for me, Everfair seems like more than an alternative history. It seems like it does something to our collective real history somehow.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, to start with where we were, with something more, there's a point at which Ali realizes that she's talking to someone from the future, not the past. And the reason that she has believed that it was the past was because they were Black people. And everyone knows there's no Black people in the future. They're all consigned to the past, to savagery and, to sort of like coming up from the apes and all that kind of stuff. So there's that. And then she does actually get told, know where your future. So there's that way of messing with time. Oh, excuse me, my cat is ringing the bell, and that means I have to let her out. There you go.
That's great.
She's a very clever cat. She's learned that if she rings the bell that I have hanging on the door, I let her out. So anyway, so then going to Everfair, there are people who say that say that they have felt that Everfair is more real than the history that we've been taught, that it seems that this world actually happened, because it feels right in some ways that people would rise up and organize themselves in this way and you know, take care of one another. What I'm trying to do in Kinning is show ways that consciousness is not limited by that linear concept of time. So I have things happening before their causes have happened, and that kind of thing. I was basically forced into this understanding by a woman named Rashida Phillips. She's a science fiction author and also a lawyer in a humanitarian sense, who works mainly in Philadelphia. And her whole thing can be summed up in, or summed up in the statement, "Time is a lie." And I first encountered that idea and thought, no, time is not a lie. Time is how we know when we're doing things together, and time is something that we've agreed on. But it is also true that time is a lie in the sense of time being progressive, because there are so many other ways of understanding time, as cyclical, as spiraling, as undifferentiated. So I like to think that as we learn more about the different ways of looking at time, we learn more about time.
Wonderful, thank you. It's probably a good place as well to note that it was the anniversary of the fall of the Paris Commune yesterday, where I believe they kind of undid certain kind of ideas of time, or, you know, changed them. Thank you for that. Yeah, I have another question about something more, which is that it's a story about music. One of the characters says that it's the only thing worth studying. And the speculative nation Everfair, and you mentioned as well the sequel that you're working on, Kinning, which is very exciting to hear. But yeah, Everfair, the nation, is named after a song that becomes the national anthem. What draws you to music in your fiction? What do you like as well? What do you like to listen to, and what are you listening to at the moment?
Oh, what draws me to music is its power. I think that it's incredibly powerful, and it's something that is not understood. I like that about it too. I've heard music described as a universal language, and I think that's crap, because music is not universal in that people become used to different conventions for music, different scales, different rhythmic patterns, and those are the ones that move them most. But music in and of itself acts on humans in a way that is inexplicable. I used to be in a band. I still want to, my ambition is to write things that are as moving as particular songs. I don't know. It's all, it affects me, and I think it affects most other people. Not everyone, but most other people. And so I want to emulate that as much as I can, to the point of, yes, I wrote something more about a particular singer and their experience with music. I think that music is a good way of getting us to understand time differently, in its repetition and its changes. So I think those two are linked. As to what I'm listening to now, I tend to be very utilitarian in what I'm listening to. So I create, I have a Pandora station that I used when I was writing Everfair, and I'm using it again for Kinning in some chapters, which is full of Afro-Cuban chants, Congolese music, Malian music. I've been listening to a ton of a Congolese group called Kekele, and just Papa Noel and Papi Oviedo, a ton of Congolese music, because a lot of where I'm writing is the Congo. I also listen to a ton of Chinese traditional music. This is not what you were expecting, is it? And then the other major influence that I have is Steely Dan, okay? And I am old enough that I heard them for the first time when their original albums came out. Steely Dan, there's a special relationship between Black people and the Steely Dan group, who are mostly white, and but they're paying homage to Black music of all sorts as in their work. And a lot of times you will hear people say things like, well, we're dressing up like Indians as and to honor them or something, and that is crap. But what Steely Dan does honor Black music, and so I honor them for that.
Great, thank you for that. Yeah, when you mentioned earlier that people thought that Everfair was more real than the actual history, it kind of was one of my experiences while reading it as well, was kind of something like, it might sound a little bit strange, but like how little it might have taken to get a history like that. Because as one of the reviewers notes, it's a novel in which the Fabian socialists used their money to buy some land in the Belgian Congo, stolen land from King Leopold II of Belgium. But instead, in our timeline, they used it to found the London School of Economics, right?
Yeah.
And it's just kind of, yeah. I was wondering if you could say more about that sense of like intervening in history in that way. I mean, you have in a way, but.
Well, I think that history has the word story in it. And so it is the story that we're telling ourselves about what happened, and what the meaning is of what happened. So if you just change one tiny aspect, you can get an enormously different perspective on events, because you've changed the story that people tell about it. Yeah. Sorry,
Totally.
that's not a very long answer.
No, but it's a good one. Sorry. Yeah, we might not. Do we have any questions at all from the audience on YouTube? If not, I can go with more.
No, not so far.
Not so
but
far.
This is an invitation for people. They can write in the chat.
Yeah, please do, and we will deliver them. But yeah, another moment in Talk Like a Man, or the essay in Talk Like a Man on IFA, what's it? sorry, I must get the title up. Sorry. It's called IFA Reverence, Science and Social Technology. It's this great argument that science fiction shouldn't kind of avoid religious or spiritual concerns, and that they are powerful social technologies. And you talk about your own faith practice. And I was wondering if you could talk more as well about what you think this kind of twist on a definition of the technologies which are changed by science fiction, which obviously your work enacts, what this could do to science fiction writing.
So there's an author that you may have heard of, a science fiction author called Kim Stanley Robinson. And he gave a huge speech at WisCon, as a matter of fact, a convention that's happening this weekend. Several years ago, when he was a guest of honor, he was talking about social technologies. I did not get this idea from him, but he explains it very well. So I recommend looking at his guest of honor speech. But basically, how I came at it is this way. I am the descendant of people who came to the hemisphere where I live, stripped of all physical belongings. But there were ways of knowing things and ways of using ideas that remained because their heads remained, their brains remained, their minds remained. So I think of technology as a tool, and that tool does not have to be physical. It can be social, it can be mental, it can be emotional. And because that was all that was left to many people who were enslaved and brought over from Africa, that is the richest part of the legacy I've inherited, is these social technologies. And there are very specific ways that they can be realized and recognized in society today. Ways of relating. So for instance, in a typical grouping of people who were using certain West African social technologies, there were two ways of relating. You could relate to your age group, and because you would have, you know, people who were in the same age group who were perhaps relatives, who probably were relatives, people who had the same concerns as you know, am I going to have a child? You know, am I going to form an alliance with this other family? You know, and then other concerns at different points in life. So you can have that, and you can also have what is called, I'm not sure which language this is from. You could have what's called a dopkwe, D-O-P-K-W-E, which is a group that cuts across age stratification and is concerned with a particular task. So you can have a dopkwe that is dedicated to doing the work of hunting. You can have a dopkwe that is dedicated to doing the work of weaving. And these ways of organizing our social technologies.
Absolutely, wonderful. And I guess another piece of social technology you kind of use is to organize in the science fiction community through, you know, a little institution like the Carl Brandon Society. We don't have very long left, but yeah, I was wondering if you could just say something briefly about your experience of organizing in that regard, in the kind of in a writing community, right?
Well, yes. What can I say other than, yes, writing is a solitary expression of a community's genius. the stories that I tell are not told in isolation. They're told in resonance with other stories. They're told in resonance with other people's viewpoints. I actively work against the idea that, you know, we only need like so many queer writers, we only need so many, you know, East Asian writers, because the more you have, the more viewpoints and the richer and more nuanced and deeper is the understanding that is shared from these viewpoints. So I've always done things where I've like tried to recommend other people for doing editing jobs or editing anthologies or contributing to anthologies or teaching, because I don't want to be alone. I want people to come with me, and then we might go someplace that I had never dreamed of.
Seems like a wonderful point at which to leave it. It's beautiful. And yeah, that generosity shines through in the work. Also, just to say that some people on YouTube were saying how wonderful it was to hear you sing. And they're, yeah, really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad I got to share this with you all. I lived in Scotland for a while. Did I say that?
No, but I noticed it in the interview, and I was going to ask you actually, if you want to, yeah, maybe one final question. Yeah, how long did you live in Scotland for, and where?
So, I lived on the island of Tiree in the Outer Hebrides for 3 months. Beautiful. And then I came back and I lived partly there, and I also lived in Perth, not Perth, Australia, but Perth on the East Coast. I visited Edinburgh, but I never was able to afford to live there. Yeah. I don't know what to say about that time. It was a long time ago.
And now you're near the Pacific, which is
a different ocean. Yeah. I miss Scotland. I would love to come back. But thank you for at least having me make this very, very thin connection.
In virtual Edinburgh. Wonderful. Yeah, I guess is that it?
That's it for me.
Great.
Great. Thank you both so much.
Thank you. Still says it's live. Do you have to nip off to another event?
No, I don't. I'm just waiting for the live stream to end. There's a small delay between Zoom and YouTube, so that's why we're waiting.
Yeah.